The courtroom went silent when the 11-year-old girl stood up and pulled her dress down over one shoulder. 3 silver stars burned deep into her back, over and over, the same 3 stars on her uncle's belt buckle. "Those are lies." Curtis Bishop was on his feet now, his face purple with rage. "That land belongs to me. Those children belong to me." But the children didn't belong to him. They never had. And this is the story of how a broken hermit with 3 frozen girls on his doorstep became the only thing standing between them and a man who'd killed to get what he wanted. It started with a knock. 3 weak knocks on a cabin door in the middle of a blizzard, in the middle of nowhere. She shoved her baby sister into his arms and collapsed face first into the snow. 11 years old, barefoot, 6 miles through a blizzard that could kill a grown man in half that distance. The belt marks on her back were still bleeding through her torn dress, dark red against white fabric against white snow. 3 silver stars, branded deep into young skin, fresh enough that steam rose from the wounds when the wind hit them just right. "Save them first," she whispered. The words came out broken, half-frozen, barely human. "He's coming." Behind her, a 7-year-old stood frozen at the edge of the porch light, crying without sound, the kind of crying that came from a child who'd learned that loud crying got you hurt worse. And in his arms, pressed against his chest, a 4-year-old whimpered, light as bones, literally light as bones. He could feel every rib through her thin dress, every ridge of her spine, every knob of her shoulders. The wind screamed through the pines like something dying, and through the storm, half a mile out, a lantern was moving, fast, getting faster. The uncle was coming to finish what he started. James Hart's hands hadn't moved in 11 days. Not to help anyone, not to touch anyone, not to speak to another living soul. He'd come to this mountain to be alone with his ghosts, to let the silence swallow him whole, to die slowly in a place where no one would notice or care. But those 3 weak knocks on his door had changed everything. The girl's knees hit his porch like gunshots. The sound echoed in the frozen air, sharp, final, the sound of something breaking that couldn't be put back together. James caught her before her skull cracked the boards. His hands, scarred from 30 years at the forge, wrapped around a body that weighed nothing. Skin and bone. 11 years of skin and bone wrapped in terror and frostbite and the kind of determination that could walk 6 miles through hell itself. Save them first. Her voice cracked on the words, broke open like ice under too much weight. "Please, mister, save them first." Then her eyes rolled back, white showing, body going limp in his arms. The 7-year-old screamed from the edge of the porch light, high and sharp and absolutely terrified. "Lucy." Her voice tore at the night. "Rose, wake up." James looked up. 2 more. A middle child clutching a rag doll to her chest like a shield, feet bare and blue, and the tiny one still in his arms, shaking so hard her teeth clicked together in a rhythm like Morse code, spelling out, "Help, help, help." 3 girls, 3 half-frozen girls on his doorstep in the middle of a blizzard, in the middle of nowhere. He hadn't spoken to another soul in 11 days. Hadn't wanted to. Had come up here specifically to avoid moments like this, moments where other people's pain could reach him, where he might have to feel something other than the hollow ache in his chest. He turned to Rose. Her lips were gray, pulse weak under his fingers. "Not yet," James heard himself say. "Inside. Now. Move." The 7-year-old didn't move. Her eyes were locked on her sister's face, on the blood seeping through the dress, on the way Rose's head lolled boneless against James's shoulder. "I said move." She flinched, whole body jerking back like he'd raised a hand to her. Then she ran, small feet slapping against frozen wood, ragdoll clutched tight enough to strangle. James kicked the door wide. Heat from the forge hit his face like a fist. The coals glowed red in the darkness, cherry bright, the only light in a world gone black and white and red. He laid the oldest one on the bench near the stove. The smell rose up immediately, blood and frozen skin and fear. The belt marks on her back wept clear fluid where the skin had split. 3 silver stars stamped into flesh, over and over, Someone had swung hard. Someone had enjoyed it. The pattern was deliberate, methodical, the kind of thing that took time and attention and a special kind of hate. Molly, the tiny one, squirmed in his arms, her voice high and scared and so small it almost disappeared into the roar of the fire. "Lucy, I'm scared." The 7-year-old Lucy stood by the door, dripping melted snow, shaking, watching James like he might turn into a monster any second. Like every adult eventually turned into a monster, and it was just a matter of time. "I ain't going to hurt you," James said. The words felt strange in his mouth. 7 years of silence had made his voice rusty, rough as old iron. That's what Uncle Curtis said, too. The name hung in the air between them. Curtis, the man with the lantern, the man who was coming. James went still. "What's your name?" he asked the tiny one. "Molly." She buried her face in his shirt, her breath hot and wet against his chest. "And that's Lucy. And Rose takes care of us. She always takes care of us. But now she's dead, and Uncle Curtis is coming, and he's going to kill us too, just like Mama and Papa." The words tumbled out in a rush. 4 years old and already carrying the weight of 2 dead parents and a certainty of her own death. "Rose ain't dead," James said. He set Molly down on the bench beside her sister, gentle as he could with hands built for hammer work. "And ain't nobody killing anyone tonight, not while I'm breathing." Molly looked up at him, blue eyes swimming in tears, snot running down her lip. "You promise." The word hit him like a blade between the ribs. Promise. 7 years ago he'd made promises. To his wife, Catherine. Promises about forever. About growing old together. About raising their son in this cabin on this mountain in this life they were building with their own 2 hands. He'd broken every single one when she bled out in his arms, and the baby boy lived 3 hours before his tiny lungs gave up fighting. "I promise," James heard himself say. The word tasted like rust, like old blood, like something dead he'd dragged up from a grave he'd spent 7 years digging. He turned to Rose. Her lips were gray, pulse weak under his fingers, frostbite on both hands black at the tips. Her feet were worse. She'd walked through hell to get here, literally walked through a frozen hell that would have killed most grown men. "How far did you run?" he asked Lucy. 6 miles. Her voice was flat, dead, empty of everything except exhaustion, maybe more. Rose carried Molly the whole way. I wanted to help, but she said I had to save my strength. She said if she fell, I had to keep running and not look back. "Did you look back?" Lucy's chin trembled. "I always look back. That's how I saw his lantern." James moved to the window, wiped the frost with his palm. There, a light in the darkness, bobbing through the snow, fast, too fast for casual travel, the kind of fast that came from hunting. "How long ago?" 20 minutes. Lucy's voice cracked. "Maybe less. 20 minutes. The rider would be here in 10, maybe 5 if he pushed the horse hard. 5 minutes to decide what to do. 5 minutes to figure out how to protect 3 children from a man who'd already proven he was willing to kill them." Lucy James kept his voice steady. Even. The voice he'd used during the war when boys younger than these girls were dying in his arms and panic meant everyone died. "I need you to do something for me." She didn't answer, just watched him with those 2 old eyes, eyes that had seen things no 7-year-old should ever see. "Get that wool blanket off my bed. Wrap it around your sisters. Keep them warm. Can you do that? I always do that." The words were so tired, so resigned, so absolutely certain of their truth that James felt something crack in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 7 years. She moved quick, silent, like a girl who'd learned to be invisible, who'd learned that being noticed meant being hurt. James grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace, checked the chamber, loaded, 6 rounds. He had maybe 30 more in the cabinet, but if it came to a firefight with 30 rounds, he was already dead. "Mister," Molly's voice wobbled from the bench. "Are you going to shoot Uncle Curtis?" James looked at her, 4 years old, shaking on a stranger's bench, asking about murder like she was asking about dinner. What kind of hell had these girls lived through? "I'm going to do what needs doing," he said. "You stay inside. Don't come out no matter what you hear." But what if? No matter what. He walked to the door, pulled it open. The cold hit his face like a fist wrapped in barbed wire. 2 riders now, not 1. The first carried the lantern. The second wore a star on his chest. Sheriff. The bastard had brought the sheriff. They stopped 30 yards out, close enough to see, far enough to run if things went bad. The lantern man dismounted first. Thin, clean coat, silver buckle at his waist catching the light. 3 stars. The same 3 stars currently branded into an 11-year-old's back. James's finger found the trigger. Samuel Hollister. The man's voice carried smooth over the wind. Pleasant, like he was ordering coffee, like he hadn't just chased 3 children through a blizzard with intent to murder. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Ain't nothing here that belongs to you, Curtis. Curtis Bishop smiled. It didn't touch his eyes, didn't come anywhere close to touching his eyes. My nieces, Mr. Hollister, my brother's children, they ran off tonight after some correction. I've been worried sick. Worried sick, James spat into the snow. That why you beat the oldest one bloody discipline, Mr. Hollister? Curtis's voice stayed smooth, calm, reasonable. Children need discipline. Surely you understand. I understand the marks on her back. I understand she walked 6 miles barefoot in a blizzard to get away from you. That ain't discipline. That's torture. Curtis's smile thinned, went sharp at the edges. The sheriff shifted in his saddle. Tom Brooks, honest man mostly, family man, the kind who followed rules because rules made sense, and without rules, the world fell apart. Sam Brooks's voice was tired, worn thin by too many years of dealing with men like Curtis in situations like this. I don't like this any more than you do, but Mr. Bishop here has legal custody, signed by Judge Harrison himself. Judge Harrison is in his pocket. That may be. Brooks sounded like he believed it, like he knew it for certain but couldn't do anything about it because knowing and proving were 2 different things. But the paper looks real, and I can't ignore legal paper. Curtis stepped forward, boots crunching in the snow, close enough now that James could see the calculation behind his eyes, the cold math of a man deciding whether violence was worth the risk. 10 days, Mr. Hollister. Curtis's voice dropped, went soft and dangerous. That's what the law gives you to return my property, return my nieces, or you'll be charged with kidnapping. He paused, let the word hang in the frozen air. And I think we both know what people will say about a man like you keeping 3 young girls in his cabin. James's blood went cold, colder than the wind, colder than the snow, cold like ice forming in his veins. What's that supposed to mean? Curtis tilted his head, studied James like he was a bug pinned to a board. You've been alone a long time. 7 years, isn't it? No wife, no children, no visitors. He spread his hands, and suddenly 3 young girls appear in your home. The implication hung there. Ugly, vicious, the kind of accusation that stuck to a man even if it was proven false. Especially if it was proven false. People talk, Mr. Hollister. Curtis's smile came back, sharper now, full of teeth. People wonder. Which one do you think the town will believe? A concerned uncle trying to retrieve his orphaned nieces, or a hermit with a rifle and 3 little girls? You're a snake. I'm a concerned uncle. Curtis's voice went cold, hard, the mask slipping just enough to show what was underneath. You're a hermit with a rifle and questionable intentions. The door creaked behind James. Mr. Hollister rose his voice, weak but burning, fierce despite the cold and the pain and the exhaustion that should have kept her unconscious for hours. James turned. She was standing in the doorway, Lucy and Molly behind her, her face white as the snow, legs barely holding her up. But her one good eye, the one that wasn't swollen shut from Curtis's fist, was fixed on her uncle with absolute clarity. That man killed my parents, she said, made it look like an accident. I heard him talking about it with Judge Harrison, about how much our land was worth, about how he'd get rid of us too. Curtis's face flickered. Just for a second, the mask cracking, then it slid back into place, smooth, practiced, perfect. The child is hysterical, he said, traumatized. She doesn't know what she's saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Rose stepped onto the porch. The cold hit her bare arms and she didn't flinch, didn't even seem to notice. "You killed Mama and Papa for the land. The railroad wants to run through our property. You stand to make $10,000 if we're gone." Brooks's face changed, went still. $10,000 was a fortune, the kind of fortune men killed for, the kind of fortune that made accusations of murder suddenly seem a lot more believable. "Vernon, she's lying." But Curtis's voice had lost some of its smoothness, gone rough at the edges, confused by grief. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." "Then let a court sort it out." James raised the rifle slightly. "Just enough, just a fraction. 10 days, you said. Fine, I'll use every one of them. But tonight these girls stay with me." Curtis's jaw tightened. His hands clenched. For a second James thought he might draw, might go for whatever weapon he had hidden under that clean coat, might make this whole thing simple and final. "You're making a mistake, Hollister." Curtis's voice dropped to a whisper. "Dangerous. Promising violence. A very expensive mistake. Maybe." James met his eyes, held them, didn't blink, didn't look away. "But I've made worse." They stared at each other. The wind howled between them. Molly whimpered behind Rose. Lucy clutched her rag doll like it was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop shifting. Finally Curtis turned to his horse. Mounted, smooth, practiced. A man who'd done this 1,000 times. 10 days, he said over his shoulder. "Then I'm coming back with deputies. And when I do, I'll take what's mine. One way or another." He rode off into the white, the lantern bobbing, getting smaller, disappearing into the storm like a demon returning to hell. Brooks lingered, sat his horse, looked at James with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. "Sam," his voice dropped, quiet enough that Curtis wouldn't hear. "Be careful. I've seen men like Bishop before. He won't play fair. Neither will I." Brooks nodded, tipped his hat, followed Curtis into the darkness. James stood on the porch until the lantern disappeared, until there was nothing but wind and snow and the sound of his own breathing. Then he turned around. Rose had collapsed again. Lucy was holding her up, staggering under the weight. Molly was crying. Those silent tears again. The kind that came from a child who'd learned that loud crying got you hit. "Inside," James said, his voice rough, worn thin. "Inside now." He scooped Rose up. She weighed nothing, less than nothing. A bundle of bones and skin and stubborn will that should have died 3 miles back but refused to quit. He got her to the bench, built up the fire, put the kettle on, found the salve he used for burns, tore an old shirt into bandages. His hands were too big for this kind of work, scarred from the forge, built for iron, not flesh. But he'd learned gentleness once, from Catherine, in those few hours with their son before the bleeding started and wouldn't stop. "This is going to hurt," he told Rose. "Frostbite always does when the feeling comes back." "I know." Her voice was steady, steadier than it should have been, steadier than most grown men's would be. "I've had frostbite before." James didn't ask when, didn't want to know, didn't want to imagine what kind of life led an 11-year-old to say those words like they were normal. He worked on her hands first. The black tips would likely shed skin, maybe lose some feeling permanently, but she'd keep the fingers. Her feet were worse. She might lose a toe, maybe 2. "Mr. Hollister?" Lucy's voice came from near the fire. She'd wrapped Molly in the wool blanket. The little one had finally stopped crying, was sucking her thumb and staring at the flames with the blank expression of a child who'd reached the absolute limit of what she could process. "Yeah. Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Helping us. You don't know us. You don't owe us nothing." The question hung there. Simple. Direct. Impossible to answer with anything less than the truth. James thought about the door, about the choice he'd made when he opened it, about the 7 years he'd spent trying to feel nothing, and care about nothing, and be nothing, except a ghost haunting his own life. "I had a son once," he said quietly, "and a wife. They died 7 years ago. My boy lived 3 hours. My wife held on a little longer. Not much. The fire crackled. Molly's breathing had evened out. Asleep or close enough? I came out here to be alone, James continued. Figured if I didn't care about anyone, I couldn't lose anyone. He finally looked at Lucy. But then you knocked on my door. Rose knocked. I just followed. Doesn't matter who knocked. What matters is I opened it. James turned back to Rose's feet, gentle as he could manage. Once you open a door, you can't pretend you didn't see what's on the other side. Lucy was quiet for a long moment. Our papa used to say something like that. Yeah, he said a man's worth ain't measured by what he has. It's measured by what he does when nobody's watching. Smart man. Uncle Curtis killed him anyway. James's hands went still. You sure about that? What Rose said? I'm sure. Lucy's voice was hard, harder than any 7-year-old's voice should be, harder than steel heated and beaten and folded until it wouldn't break. The wagon wheel didn't come off by accident. I saw Uncle Curtis near the barn the night before. He had tools, Papa's tools. He was doing something to the wheels. Did you tell anyone? Who would I tell? Lucy's laugh was bitter. Old. Uncle Curtis is the one who decides who listens and who doesn't. James finished wrapping Rose's feet. The girl had passed out somewhere in the middle, her body finally giving in to exhaustion, to blood loss, to the accumulated weight of months of abuse and terror. Is she going to be okay? Lucy asked. She needs rest, food, warmth. James stood, his knees cracked, old injuries from the war making themselves known. Same as you. I'm fine. You're half frozen and starving. I said I'm fine. James looked at her. 7 years old, spine straight, chin up, refusing to show weakness even now, even here where weakness might actually be safe. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said. Not here. Something flickered in Lucy's face, something that wanted to believe him, that desperately wanted to believe him but had learned through bitter experience that believing got you hurt. Rose says we always have to be strong. She says if we show weakness, people use it against us. Rose has been taking care of you a long time, hasn't she? Since Mama and Papa died. Lucy's voice dropped, went quiet. Before that, too. Sometimes. When Papa had to work late and Mama was sick. What was wrong with her? I don't know. She just got tired, real tired. And then one day she couldn't get out of bed anymore. Lucy swallowed hard. And Papa said we had to be brave for her. So, we were brave. We were so brave. The fire popped, a log shifting, sending up sparks that died against the stone chimney. And then, she died anyway. James walked to the stove, poured hot water into a cup, added a spoonful of honey, the last of his honey. He'd been saving it. For what he didn't know, but he'd been saving it. Drink this, he said, pressing it into Lucy's hands. Her fingers were cold. So cold. Warm you up from the inside. She stared at it like she'd never seen kindness before. Like the concept of someone giving her something without wanting something in return was completely foreign. What is it? Honey water? James crouched down. Got to her level. It'll help. She took a sip, then another. Her shoulders dropped. Just slightly. Just enough. Mr. Hollister. Yeah, Rose said we shouldn't trust strangers. She said everyone wants something. Lucy looked up at him. What do you want? James thought about the question, about all the answers he could give. I want to sleep through the night without dreaming about my dead wife. I want to finish a horseshoe without thinking about the ones I made for our wedding. I want to stop feeling like my chest is full of broken glass every time I see a child about the age mine would have been. But right now, he said instead, right now I just want to keep you and your sisters safe. That's all. Lucy studied his face, looking for the lie, the angle, the hidden price that always came due eventually. Okay, she said finally. Quiet, like a door cracking open just a little, just enough to let in a sliver of light. Okay, Mr. James, close enough. Around midnight, Molly started screaming. James was at the bed before he knew he'd moved. Some old instinct from the war, the kind that kept you alive when shells were falling and boys were dying and a second's hesitation meant joining them. The little girl was thrashing, eyes squeezed shut, clawing at something only she could see. "No, don't put me in there. Don't lock the door. Please, Uncle Curtis, please. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." Lucy was already awake, trying to hold her sister down, trying to wake her without making it worse. Rose struggled up on one elbow, face twisted with pain, with the absolute certainty that she needed to fix this because she was the oldest and fixing things was her job. Molly James's voice was gentle, firm, the voice he'd used with wounded soldiers who'd lost themselves in the blood and the screaming. "Wake up. You're safe. The dark. The dark is coming. I can see it. It's coming to get me." James did something he hadn't done in 7 years. He gathered the tiny girl in his arms and held her against his chest. Let her feel his heartbeat. Let her anchor to something solid in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. "Ain't no dark here," he said quietly. "See fires burning bright. I'm right here. Ain't nothing going to hurt you." Molly's eyes flew open, wild, terrified, seeing monsters that weren't there and had never stopped being there. Then she saw his face, felt his arms around her, and something broke. She sobbed, really sobbed, loud and ugly and raw, the way a child should be allowed to sob but hadn't been, the way grief and fear and relief all came out at once in a sound that was barely human. James held her while she cried. He didn't shush her, didn't tell her to be quiet. Just let her break, let her shatter, let her bleed out all the poison that had been building up inside. Behind him, Rose whispered to Lucy, "He's not going to hurt her." "I know," Lucy whispered back. "Nobody's that good. Maybe he is." Sam didn't hear them. He was too busy holding a 4-year-old girl who'd just learned that monsters were real, that sometimes they wore your family's face, that the only thing standing between you and the dark was a stranger who'd opened his door. Mr. James Molly's voice was muffled against his chest, thick with tears and snot and exhaustion. "Yeah, little one. Do you have a doggie? I like doggies. We used to have a doggie named Biscuit, but Uncle Curtis kicked him and he ran away and I never saw him again." James's jaw tightened. "I got a dog. His name's Bear. He's sleeping in the barn tonight because he don't like strangers, but I reckon he'll like you just fine once he meets you." Molly pulled back, looked at him with those huge blue eyes, red-rimmed from crying, swollen from exhaustion. "Really? Really? You can meet him tomorrow if you want." "I want." She yawned. Sudden, huge, jaw-cracking. "Mr. James, will you stay while I sleep, so the dark don't come back?" James looked at Rose, at Lucy, at the rifle by the window, at the darkness outside where Curtis Bishop was planning his next move. "I'll stay," he said. "I'll be right here." Molly smiled, the first smile he'd seen from any of them, small, tentative, like she'd forgotten how and was just now remembering. Then she closed her eyes and was asleep in seconds. James sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on Molly's back, feeling her breathe, feeling her tiny ribs expand and contract under his palm. Proof of life, proof that she'd made it, that they'd all made it, at least for tonight. Outside, a rider was watching the cabin from the tree line. Snow clung to his shoulders, his horse stamped in the cold, restless, wanting to be somewhere warm, somewhere that wasn't this frozen hell. Curtis Bishop didn't smile. He didn't need to. He'd already sent the telegram to Judge Harrison, already set the wheels in motion, already started spreading the poison that would turn the whole town against James Hart. The hermit thought he'd won tonight, thought his rifle and his stubbornness would be enough. He was wrong. By morning, every person in Silver Creek would believe that James Hart was a dangerous man, a deviant, a threat to children. By week's end, they'd be calling for his arrest. By day 10, he'd have nothing left. No reputation, no standing, no defense against the law when it came for him. And then the girls would be his again. This time, he wouldn't make the mistake of letting them run. This time, he'd make sure they understood. Make sure they knew what happened to little girls who told tales, who accused their loving uncle of things that couldn't be proven. The railroad was coming, the money was waiting, and 3 little girls were the only thing standing in his way. Not for long. Curtis pulled his coat tighter and turned his horse toward town. 10 days. That was more than enough time to destroy one broken hermit. More than enough time to claim what was rightfully his. More than enough time to teach 3 orphans that defiance had a price. He rode into the storm, the lantern swinging, the light getting smaller, until there was nothing but darkness and wind and the promise of violence yet to come. In the cabin, James sat with 3 sleeping girls and a rifle across his knees, watching the window, watching for movement, watching for the light that would signal Curtis's return. It didn't come. Not that night. But it would come. James knew that with absolute certainty. Men like Curtis Bishop didn't give up, didn't back down, didn't forget. They waited. They planned. They struck when you thought you were safe. James had seen it before, during the war, during the years after, when men who'd learned to kill kept killing because it was the only thing they knew how to do anymore. He checked the rifle again. 6 rounds. 30 more in the cabinet, enough to hold off a small army if it came to that. But it wouldn't come to that. Not tonight. Tonight Curtis was playing a different game, a longer game, the kind that destroyed you slowly, that took everything you had piece by piece until there was nothing left but the shell of who you used to be. James had played that game before too, against himself, for 7 years. He'd lost. But this was different. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about 3 girls who'd walked through hell and knocked on his door, who'd trusted him with their lives when they had no reason to trust anyone. He wouldn't let them down. Couldn't let them down. Not when Molly was sleeping with her hand curled against his leg. Not when Lucy was finally resting without that haunted look in her eyes. Not when Rose had fought so hard to get them here, to this moment, to this impossible, fragile safety. The fire burned low. James added another log, watched the flames catch, watched the light push back against the darkness. Morning would come. With it would come decisions, plans. The beginning of a fight James wasn't sure he could win, but for now in this moment 3 girls were warm and safe and sleeping. It was enough. It had to be enough, because it was all he had to give. Morning came gray and cold. James hadn't slept. His eyes burned. His back ached from sitting rigid all night. But the girls were alive. That was enough. Rose woke first. She always woke first. 11 years of protecting her sisters had trained her body to never rest too deep, to always be ready for the next crisis, the next threat, the next moment when everything would fall apart again. "Mr. James?" Her voice was rough, scraped raw from screaming and crying and breathing frozen air for 6 miles. He turned from the window. "How you feeling? Like I got trampled by a horse." She sat up slowly, wincing, every movement a negotiation with pain, but I felt worse. James believed her. That was the terrible part, the certainty in her voice, the casual way she assessed her own damage like it was just another Tuesday. "I'm going to make breakfast," he said. "Eggs, bacon if I can find some. You stay in bed. I can help. You can rest." "I don't know how to rest." James looked at her. 11 years old, dark circles under her eyes like bruises, shoulders squared like she was waiting for a blow, still ready to fight even though she could barely stand. "Then learn," he said. "Starting today." He walked to the stove. Behind him he heard Lucy stirring, heard Molly mumbling in her sleep about doggies and dark cellars and promises that might or might not be kept. The eggs were frying when the knock came. James grabbed his rifle, moved to the door. "Who's there?" Margaret Ford from the telegraph office. A woman's voice, sharp, clear, cutting through the wood like a blade. "We need to talk about what?" "About the 3 girls you've got in there. And about Curtis Bishop." James cracked the door. A woman stood on his porch, small but straight-backed, dark hair pinned tight, eyes sharp as flint. The kind of woman who'd seen enough of the world to know exactly how ugly it could get. "Can I come in?" she asked. "I'd rather not have this conversation where his men might hear." James opened the door wider. She stepped inside, stamping snow off her boots. She stopped when she saw the girls. Her face changed, softened in a way that suggested she understood, that she'd seen this kind of damage before. "Oh, honey." She moved toward Rose, then stopped herself, asking permission with her eyes. "May I?" Rose nodded, weary, too tired to maintain her guard. Margaret crouched beside the bed, examined Rose's bandaged hands, her wrapped feet, the bruises on her face that were turning from red to purple to that sick yellow-green that meant old damage layered under new. "Who did this to you?" "Uncle Curtis. The belt marks, too." "Yes, ma'am." Margaret's jaw tightened. She stood, turned to James. "The whole town's talking. Curtis rode in at dawn, told everyone you kidnapped his nieces, said you're dangerous, said you have unnatural intentions toward children." James's grip tightened on the rifle, and they believed him. Some did, some didn't. Margaret pulled a folded paper from her coat. "But this came through the telegraph this morning, addressed to Sheriff Brooks from Judge Harrison." James took the paper. "Read it." His stomach dropped. "Custody order, immediate return of the children, or he'd be arrested for kidnapping, and investigated for crimes against children." He couldn't finish, couldn't say the words out loud, not with 3 girls listening, 3 girls who'd already learned that the law wasn't on their side, that authority meant danger, that the people who were supposed to protect you were often the ones who hurt you most. "And investigated for crimes against children," Margaret finished, her voice hard, flat. "Curtis is playing dirty, Mr. James. He's not just trying to get those girls back, he's trying to destroy you." Why? James looked up from the paper. "Why does he hate me that much?" "He doesn't hate you." Margaret glanced at the girls. "He doesn't care about you at all." She moved closer, dropped her voice. "He cares about 640 acres of prime land sitting right in the path of the Northern Pacific Railroad." Rose pushed herself up on one elbow. "That's what I told him. Uncle Curtis killed our parents for the land." Margaret nodded slowly. "I believe you, child. I've believed it for months. Your father came to see me before he died, asked me to send a telegram to the territorial marshal, said he was worried about his brother, said Curtis had been asking strange questions about the property, about what would happen if something happened to him and your mother." "Did you send it?" James asked. "I tried." Margaret's hands clenched. "The line was cut that same week, and a month later your parents were dead. Can you prove any of it?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it." She looked at James. "That's why I'm here. I need your help." "My help, lady? I can barely keep these girls alive. I've got 9 days before the law comes for me." 8 days now," Margaret corrected. "And that's exactly why you need me." She pulled another paper from her coat. "This is a map of every property Curtis has acquired in the last 3 years. 4 homesteads, 4 families, 4 accidents." James studied the map. A red line cut through all 4 properties. "The railroad survey line," Margaret said. "Every single one of those homesteads sits right on it, including your land." "Your land." James looked at Rose. Mama's maiden name was Carter. Rose's voice was quiet. "Papa changed our name to protect us after Uncle Curtis started asking questions. He said if anything happened to him we should use Carter, not Bishop." "Smart man," Margaret said. "Not smart enough," Rose whispered. "The telegraph line's been cut again," Margaret continued. 2 miles east of town, right where it crosses Curtis's land. I need to fix it. Send a message to the territorial capital. Get someone to check if Judge Harrison's signature on those custody papers is real. You think it's forged? I think Curtis Bishop has been forging documents for years." Margaret's eyes blazed. "And I think if we can prove it, we can bring him down." "That's a lot of thinking. Not much proof." "Then help me get proof." Margaret grabbed his arm. "You were a soldier, weren't you? I can see it in how you hold that rifle, how you checked the windows, how you positioned yourself between me and the girls the moment I walked in." James didn't deny it. "I need someone to watch my back while I fix that telegraph line," she said. "Curtis has men everywhere. If they catch me on his property, they'll kill me. Probably. Or worse. I can't leave them alone." James looked at the girls. "I know. That's why I brought help. Another knock at the door. "It's Father Daniel," Margaret said. "I asked him to come." James opened the door. An old man stood on the porch, white hair wild from the wind, breath pluming in the cold, eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Hart," the priest said, "I've heard what Curtis is saying about you. I don't believe a word of it. You don't know me, Father. I know you saved 3 children from freezing to death." Father Daniel stepped inside. "I know you stood up to a man with the law on his side because it was the right thing to do." He moved to the bed, blessed the girls with a quick sign of the cross. "That tells me everything I need to know." "How are you feeling, children?" Betta Rose said. Then softer, "Father Daniel, do you remember my papa?" "I do. William was a good man. Came to confession once, troubled about something. Wouldn't say what." The priest's face grew serious. "But he asked me to keep something safe for him. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to someone he trusted." James's heart quickened. "What was it?" "A document. Sealed." Father Daniel reached into his coat. "I never opened it. He said I'd know the right person when I met them." He held out a yellowed envelope. Wax seal, broken by time and handling, but still mostly intact. "I believe you're that person, Mr. Hart." James took the envelope. His fingers trembled slightly as he broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, legal script, faded but clear. He read it aloud, his voice rough. "Last will and testament of William and Mary Carter. In the event of our deaths, we appoint James Hart of Silver Creek as guardian of our daughters Rose Lucy and Molly. We entrust to him all property and assets associated with our homestead to be held in trust until our eldest daughter reaches the age of 21. Silence. Then Lucy whispered, "Papa knew you." James's hand shook. The paper rattled. "I don't understand. I barely knew your father. I met him once, maybe twice." "There's more," Father Daniel said. "Keep reading." James's eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. "James Hart saved my life in the winter of 1879. A mine collapse trapped me underground. The rescue crew couldn't get through. Hart carried me 5 miles through the snow with my leg broken. He asked nothing in return, refused payment, left before I could thank him properly. I have never forgotten. If my children need a protector, he is the only man I would trust with their lives." The paper blurred. James blinked hard, forced his eyes to focus. "I remember that day," he said quietly. "There was a cave-in at the Bannock silver mine. I heard the screaming, went in, found a man trapped under timber, carried him out. That man was my Papa." Rose's voice cracked, broke open like something that had been held together by wire and will alone. "You saved his life. I didn't know his name." James looked at her, at all 3 of them. He was just a man who needed help. And you helped him. Tears ran down Rose's cheeks. Real tears. Not the silent kind. Not the kind she'd learned to cry without making noise. You saved his life. And now you're saving ours. James couldn't speak. His throat had closed up completely. Margaret broke the silence. "This changes everything. This will supersede Curtis's guardianship claim. It was written before your parents died. It's legal. Binding. If we can prove it's authentic," Father Daniel added. "The territorial circuit judge comes through in 6 weeks, Margaret said. "We don't have 6 weeks, James said. "We have 8 days. Then we work fast." Margaret turned to Father Daniel. "Can you stay with the girls tonight?" "Of course." Margaret looked at James. "We'll fix that telegraph line tonight, before Curtis knows we're coming." James studied her. This woman he'd just met. This stranger who was willing to risk her life for 3 orphans and a hermit she had no reason to trust. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because I know what it's like when nobody believes you." Margaret's voice went hard. "When the law is just a word men use to keep you quiet. I've been fighting that my whole life." She grabbed her coat. "We leave at sundown. Dress warm. It's going to be a long night." After she left, James made breakfast. The girls ate like they'd been starving for weeks. Maybe they had been. Curtis didn't seem like the type to waste food on children he was planning to kill. Molly kept asking about Bear. When could she meet him? Would he like her? Did he know any tricks? "After you eat," James said. Then we'll go to the barn." The dog was massive, black and brown, part mastiff, part something else. He'd shown up 3 years ago, half dead from a wolf attack. James had nursed him back to health and he'd never left. Bear growled when the barn door opened, low and rumbling, a sound that said, "Stay back or find out what these teeth can do." Then he saw Molly. The growl stopped. His tail started wagging so hard his whole back end moved with it. The little girl squealed, ran forward, threw her arms around a dog that weighed more than she did. Bear licked her whole face, even her nose. She giggled, the sound so pure and joyful it hurt to hear, a sound that said this child remembered how to be happy, that under all the trauma and terror there was still a little girl who just wanted to play with a dog. "He likes me," Molly shouted. "Mr. James, he likes me. Told you he would. Rose says dogs know things." Molly buried her face in Bear's fur. "Says they can tell if someone's good or bad." She looked up at James. Bear growled at Uncle Curtis's men when they came. Growled real loud. "Smart dog," James said. "The smartest." They spent an hour in the barn. Molly threw sticks that Bear brought back. Lucy sat in the hay and watched with something like peace on her face. Rose leaned against the wall, still hurting, still exhausted, but smiling, just a little. James watched them. These 3 girls who'd walked through hell, who'd knocked on his door and changed everything. He thought about the will, about William Carter, about a debt he hadn't known he owed getting repaid in the strangest way possible. That night James and Margaret rode east, staying off the main road, cutting through the tree line where Curtis's men wouldn't expect them. The telegraph line was cut clean, same as before, same deliberate slice that took time and attention. Not an accident, not weather damage, murder. Margaret worked in silence, splicing wire, testing connections. Her fingers moved fast despite the cold, despite the dark. "How long?" James asked, keeping watch, eyes scanning the tree line. "Hour. Maybe less if my fingers don't freeze." James paced a circle around her, rifle ready, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a warning. They talked while she worked, quiet, careful, voices barely above a whisper. "How'd you know about me?" James asked. "About the mine rescue?" "I didn't. Father Daniel told me this morning, after I showed him the will. He'd been holding on to that envelope for 4 years, waiting for the right person." Margaret paused, looked at him. "He saw it last night, when you stood up to Curtis, when you refused to hand over 3 beaten children to the man who beat them. I was just trying to keep them safe." "That's exactly the point," Margaret said. "You did the right thing when nobody was watching, when it cost you something. That's what William Carter saw in you. That's what I see." James didn't know how to respond. He'd spent 7 years convincing himself he was a broken man, a hermit, a ghost haunting his own life. Now 3 little girls and a stubborn telegraph operator were treating him like some kind of hero. He wasn't sure he could live up to it. Done. Margaret packed up her tools. "I can send the message as soon as we get back to town. We should have an answer by tomorrow." "Will it work? Will they answer in time?" "I don't know," she said honestly, "but it's the best chance we've got." They rode back as the sun rose, the world turning from black to gray to that pale gold that meant morning was coming whether you were ready or not. Father Daniel was dozing in the chair by the fire when they returned. The girls were still asleep, tangled together in the bed like puppies. Safe. Still safe. "I'll send the telegram now," Margaret said. "Meet me at the telegraph office at noon. We should have an answer by then." She rode off toward town. James sat down heavily. The exhaustion hit him all at once. His eyes burned, his bones ached, everything hurt. "Mr. James." Molly was standing in front of him, her face inches from his. "You were crying in your sleep." He touched his face. "Wet. Bad dream," he said. "Just a bad dream. I have those too." Molly climbed into his lap without asking permission, curled against his chest like she belonged there. "Rose says if you hold on to something warm, the bad dreams can't get you." James's arms wrapped around her. Instinct. Muscle memory from a lifetime ago when he'd held his own son for those 3 precious hours. Rose is pretty smart, he managed. She's the smartest person in the whole world. Molly yawned. But don't tell Lucy I said that. She thinks she's smartest because she can read big words. Your secret's safe with me. They sat like that for a while, the fire crackling. Outside, the wind had died down. Sunlight streamed through the window. Weak, pale, but light nonetheless. "Mr. James?" "Yeah, little one. Are you going to be our new papa?" The question hit him like a punch to the chest. "I don't know," he said carefully. "Maybe. If you want me to be." "I want." Molly's voice was small but certain. Absolute in the way only a 4-year-old could be. Rose and Lucy are scared to want things. They think if you want something, you jinx it. But I'm only 4. I don't know how to not want things yet. James laughed. He couldn't help it. The sound surprised him. Rough, rusty, like a machine that hadn't been used in years. "Then you keep wanting, little one. You keep wanting for all of us." "Okay." She snuggled deeper into his chest. "Mr. James?" "Yeah, I'm hungry." "Then let's make breakfast." At noon, James rode into Silver Creek. The streets were quieter than usual. People turned away when they saw him. Whispers followed him like shadows. Monster, kidnapper, child stealer. Curtis's poison was spreading. Margaret was waiting at the telegraph office. Her face told him everything before she opened her mouth. "The message got through," she said. "I have an answer." She handed him the telegram. Her hand was shaking. James read it again. The signatures forged. Yes, Judge Harrison was in Helena the week those custody papers were signed. He couldn't have been in Silver Creek. "Someone copied his signature," Margaret said, her voice tight. "Curtis has to be." "This is it," James said. "This is the proof we need. If we can get this to Sheriff Brooks, he'll have to investigate." "Where is he?" "His office." Margaret grabbed his arm. "But James, Curtis is there too. He's been there all morning." "Filling Brooks's head with lies." "If I go in there now, then you go in there now," Margaret finished. "You confront him with the evidence. You make him face what he's done. He could have me arrested. He could. But he won't. Not yet. Not while there are witnesses. Curtis is too smart for that." James pushed through the door before Margaret could stop him. The sheriff's office was small. 1 desk, 2 chairs. A cell in the back that had never held anyone more dangerous than a drunk miner. Sheriff Brooks sat behind the desk. Curtis Bishop stood beside him, cup of coffee in his hand, smile on his face. The smile died when James walked in. "Hollister." Curtis's voice went cold. "You've got nerve showing your face in town, and you've got nerve forging legal documents." James slapped the telegram on the desk. "Read it, Tom." Brooks picked up the telegram. His face changed as he read. "This says Judge Harrison wasn't in Silver Creek when those custody papers were signed. Curtis. This says he was in Helena. The message is a lie," Curtis said. His voice rose, lost some of its smoothness. "Anyone could have sent that." "It proves nothing." "It came from the territorial clerk's office," Margaret said, stepping in behind James. "I can show you the confirmation. The message is authentic." "The message is a lie," Curtis repeated. "These people are trying to steal my nieces, my brother's children, my blood." "Your brother's children that you beat?" Bloody James said. "That's slander." "Is it?" James pulled out the copper wire Margaret had found. Same tool marks as the bolt from William Carter's wagon. The bolt that was filed so the wheel would come off. Curtis's face went white, then red, then something beyond red. "You have no proof." "I have plenty of proof." James leaned in. "I have a forged signature. I have tool marks that match. I have 3 girls with belt marks on their backs that match your buckle exactly." He pulled out the will. "And I have a legal will written by their father 2 years before you killed him. A will that names me as guardian." The room went silent. Brooks stood slowly. His hand moved to his pistol. "Curtis, I'm going to need you to come with me." "You can't be serious." Curtis laughed. It sounded wrong. Hollow. Tom, we've known each other for years. You're going to take the word of a hermit and a half-breed telegraph operator over mine. I'm going to take the word of evidence. Brooks's voice was steady. And right now, the evidence says you've got questions to answer. Curtis's mask cracked. The smooth politician disappeared. Something ugly took his place. You'll regret this, Tom. Both of you will. Maybe. Brooks pulled out his handcuffs. But I'll sleep better. He reached for Curtis's arm. Curtis moved faster than James expected. His hand came out of his coat with a derringer, small and silver and deadly. Nobody move. Brooks froze. Margaret gasped. James's hand twitched toward his rifle, but Curtis swung the gun toward him. Don't even think about it, Hollister. Curtis backed toward the door. I'm walking out of here, and if anyone tries to stop me, I'll put a bullet in the telegraph woman first. Curtis Brooks's voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who'd talked down armed men before. Don't make this worse. Worse. Curtis's voice cracked. You've already ruined everything. 4 years of planning, 4 years of waiting, and now some hermit with a guilt complex is going to take it all away. Put the gun down. Number Curtis reached the door. I'm leaving, and those girls are coming with me. Over my dead body, James said. Curtis smiled. It was the ugliest thing James had ever seen. That can be arranged. He fired. The bullet caught James in the shoulder. He went down hard, blood spraying across the floorboards, the sound echoing in the small room like thunder. Margaret screamed. Brooks drew his pistol, but Curtis was already through the door, already running for his horse. Go after him, James said, blood soaking through his shirt, his vision swimming. Go! But Margaret was at his side, pressing her hands against the wound. I've got him, she said. The bullet went clean through. You're going to be fine, but you have to stay down. The girls James managed. His vision was getting dark around the edges. He's going for the girls. Brooks will stop him. He won't. James grabbed her arm, weak, getting weaker. Curtis has men, a dozen at least. Brooks can't stop all of them. Margaret looked at his face, at the blood pooling on the floor, at the way his eyes were losing focus. Get to my cabin, James whispered. Warn them, please. Don't let him take them. I can't leave you. You have to. James's grip tightened. One last surge of strength. Please, Margaret, don't let him. The darkness swallowed him whole. Margaret ran. She'd never run so fast in her life. Her horse was tied outside the sheriff's office, and she was in the saddle before the echoes of the gunshot faded. Behind her she could hear shouting. Brooks's voice. Other voices. The town waking up to chaos. She didn't look back. The road to James's cabin was 5 miles of frozen mud and ice. Curtis had a head start. He knew shortcuts, she didn't. And he had men waiting. But Margaret had something Curtis didn't. She had the truth. And she had a promise to keep. The horse's hooves pounded against the frozen ground. Wind cut at her face. She pushed harder. 2 miles out she saw the smoke. Black smoke, rising from the direction of James's cabin. No. The word tore from her throat. No. 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 She kicked the horse into a gallop. Father Daniel heard them coming before he saw them. The sound of hooves. A lot of them. Coming fast from the east. He moved to the window, squinted through the frost. 6 riders, maybe 7. Too many to be friendly. Rose. His voice was calm, steady. The voice of a man who'd given last rites on battlefields. Get your sisters. Now. Rose didn't ask questions. She grabbed Lucy's hand, scooped Molly off the floor. The root cellar, Father Daniel said. There's a door behind the woodpile. Go. What about you? I'll hold them off. Father, you can't. I can, and I will. Daniel picked up James's rifle. His hands didn't shake. Your father trusted me with that will for 4 years. I'm not letting his children die today. You're a priest. You can't shoot anyone. Watch me. Rose stared at him for one long moment. Then she ran, pulling her sisters behind her. The root cellar was dark and cold. smelled of earth and old potatoes and things that had been buried too long. Molly started whimpering the moment the door closed. "I don't like the dark, Rose. The dark is where bad things happen." "Not this time." Rose pulled her close. "I promise. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Mr. James promised too." Molly's voice cracked. "Where's Mr. James?" Above them, the front door crashed open. Curtis's voice carried through the floorboards like poison. "Where are they, old man? Gone?" Father Daniel said, his voice steady. "Left an hour ago. You just missed them." "You're lying. I'm a priest. I don't lie. Then you won't mind if my men search the place." Footsteps. Heavy boots crossing the floor above. Rose pressed her hand over Molly's mouth. The little girl's eyes went wide, terrified. "Check the barn," Curtis ordered. "Check the shed." They couldn't have gotten far. "What about the old man? Leave him. He's not worth the bullet." The footsteps moved away. Rose heard the front door slam. Then something else. A crackling sound, growing louder. Smoke began seeping through the cracks in the cellar door. Rose Lucy's voice was tiny. "Is that fire?" Rose's blood went cold. They were burning the cabin. The smoke was getting thicker. Molly coughed, then coughed again, harder. Rose pulled her shirt over her nose, did the same for Lucy and Molly. "We need to get out. Now." But the door, Lucy whispered. "They'll see us. We'll die if we stay." Rose pushed against the cellar door, hot, too hot. But it gave way, just slightly, enough to see orange flames dancing across the cabin floor above. "The window," she said. "Behind us. The one Father Daniel talked about. It was small, barely large enough for a child. But they were children." "Go," Rose said. "Lucy first, then Molly. I'll follow. But go." Lucy squeezed through the window, dropped into the snow outside. Molly followed, crying but moving. Rose climbed after them, got stuck halfway, the window frame digging into her ribs, smoke filling her lungs. Then hands grabbed her arms, pulling. Strong hands. "I've got you," Margaret's voice. "I've got you." Rose tumbled into the snow, gasping, coughing, alive. "Where's Father Daniel? Still inside?" Margaret's face was grim. "But Brooks is here, with men. They're going after Curtis." The cabin groaned, the roof sagged, then collapsed inward in a shower of sparks and flame. Father Daniel Rose screamed, but the old priest appeared from around the side of the cabin, limping, burns on his hands, but alive. "I'm too old to die in a fire," he said. Got out through the back. Margaret pulled them all close, away from the heat, away from the smoke, toward the horses waiting in the trees. "Curtis got away," she said quietly. "But not for long. Brooks knows where he's going." She was right. Brooks and his men caught Curtis 3 miles into the woods, running, panicked, no longer smooth, no longer in control, just a man who'd finally run out of places to hide. The courthouse was packed. James had never seen so many people in one place in Silver Creek. Ranchers in their Sunday best, miners with hands still black from coal, merchants and their wives, children pressed against windows trying to see inside, even a reporter from the Helena newspaper who'd ridden through the night to cover the story. They'd come to see justice, or to see it fail. James walked in slowly, his arm in a sling, every step a reminder of the bullet Curtis had put in his shoulder 3 days ago. The wound pulled when he breathed, burned when he moved, bled through the bandages if he forgot and used that arm. Margaret was on one side, Father Daniel on the other, both ready to catch him if he fell. The girls followed behind, Rose in front holding Lucy's hand, Molly clutching her rag doll, the one that had belonged to her mother, the only thing Uncle Curtis hadn't managed to destroy. People whispered as they passed, "That's him, the one who saved them. I heard he got shot protecting the oldest girl. Curtis's lawyer says it's all lies. Says Hart kidnapped those children for their land. Look at those children. Look at their faces. You think that's lies?" They reached the front of the courtroom. James took his seat. The girl sat beside him, pressed close. Rose on his good side, Lucy next to her, Molly on the end swinging her legs because her feet didn't touch the floor. Curtis was already there, sitting at the defendant's table, his leg bandaged from where James had shot him in the woods, his face pale but composed, the mask back in place, smooth, reasonable, the concerned uncle who'd been wrongly accused. His lawyer was a thin man with spectacles and a practiced smile, the kind of smile that came from years of defending guilty men and getting them off on technicalities. He shuffled papers like this was just another day, just another case, nothing personal. All rise. The bailiff's voice echoed through the packed room. Sharp, official, final. The Honorable Judge William Bennett presiding. Everyone stood, the sound of 100 people moving at once, boots on wood, fabric rustling, breath held. The judge entered, older than James expected, gray hair, sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, the kind of eyes that had seen enough lies to know truth when it appeared. Be seated. They sat. The sound reversed. 100 people settling, waiting. We are here today to determine the guilt or innocence of Curtis Ezekiel Bishop on charges of fraud, forgery, arson, kidnapping, and murder in the first degree. The judge's voice was measured, calm, like he was discussing the weather instead of a man's life. These are serious charges. The evidence will be presented, witnesses will testify, and justice will be served. He looked at Curtis, held his gaze for a long moment. Mr. Bishop, how do you plead? Curtis's lawyer stood, smooth, practiced. Not guilty, Your Honor. My client is an upstanding citizen who has been the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by a disturbed hermit seeking to steal valuable land from orphaned children. Save it for the testimony, counselor. The judge's voice cut like a blade. Sharp. Final. No room for argument. The plea is entered. Prosecution, you may proceed. Sheriff Brooks took the stand first, his hand on the Bible, his voice steady as he swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. He told the court about the forged custody papers, about the tool marks on the telegraph wire that matched the marks on the wagon bolt, about the telegram from the territorial capital confirming that Judge Harrison's signature was fake. And on the day of the incident at Mr. Hart's cabin, the prosecutor asked, "What did you witness?" "I witnessed Curtis Bishop shoot an unarmed man in my office." Brooks's voice never wavered, never broke. "I witnessed his men set fire to Mr. Hart's cabin with 3 children inside, and I witnessed Mr. Bishop pursue those children into the woods with clear intent to harm them." Objection. Curtis's lawyer jumped up. "The sheriff is speculating about my client's intent." Overruled. The judge didn't even look at the lawyer. "Continue, Sheriff. I've been in law enforcement for 20 years. Brooks leaned forward, met the eyes of every person in the jury box. "I know what a man looks like when he's hunting prey. Curtis Bishop was hunting those girls." The courtroom murmured, low, dangerous, the sound of people deciding which side they were on. The judge banged his gavel once, sharp, final, order. Silence fell like snow. Margaret testified next, her voice clear, strong, no hesitation as she laid out the evidence piece by piece. The telegraph line cut repeatedly, always on Curtis's land, always right before someone tried to send a message to the territorial capital. The land acquisition pattern. 4 homesteads, 4 families, 4 accidents, all within 3 years, all on the railroad survey line, all acquired by Curtis within days of the owners' deaths. William Carter came to see me 2 weeks before he died. Margaret's voice tightened, just slightly, just enough to show she remembered, that she'd carry this memory forever. He said he was worried about his brother, said Curtis had been asking strange questions about the property, about what would happen if something happened to him and his wife. What did you do? I tried to send a telegram to the territorial marshal. The line was cut that same night. 4 weeks later, William and Mary Carter were dead. Their wagon crashed on a flat stretch of road where wagons don't crash. The wheel came off because the bolt had been filed. She looked at Curtis, held his gaze, didn't flinch. I believe Curtis Bishop murdered his brother and sister-in-law for their land, and I believe he planned to murder their children to complete the theft. Father Daniel testified about the will, about how William Carter had given it to him 4 years ago, about the instructions to find someone trustworthy if anything happened. How did you determine that Mr. Hart was that person? I watched him. Father Daniel's voice was gentle but firm, the voice of a man who'd spent 60 years learning to see into people's souls. I watched him stand up to a man with legal documents and a sheriff's badge. I watched him refuse to hand over 3 beaten children to the man who beat them. I watched him take a bullet protecting a little girl he'd known for less than a week. He looked at James, smiled, small, sad, proud. William Carter saved my life once, carried me 5 miles through the snow when nobody else would try. He didn't know my name, didn't ask for anything in return, just did what was right because it was right. Father Daniel's voice cracked, just slightly. That's the kind of man William wanted for his daughters, and that's the kind of man James Hart is. The courtroom was silent. Absolutely silent. The kind of silence that meant everyone was holding their breath, waiting for what came next. The prosecution calls Rose Carter to the stand. Rose stood, her face pale, her spine straight. James caught her hand as she passed. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Her voice was quiet, firm, certain. "For Mama and Papa, for Lucy and Molly, for you." She walked to the witness stand, sat down. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She looked even smaller up there, even more fragile. A child trying to hold together a world that kept breaking. "State your name for the record." "Rose Jane Carter. I'm 11 years old. And you're the oldest daughter of William and Mary Carter?" "Yes, sir." "Can you tell the court what happened on the night of October 15th, 1882? The night your parents died." Rose's hands gripped the edge of the witness box, her knuckles white, her breathing shallow. "We were going to visit Aunt Martha in Lewistown. Papa had loaded the wagon that morning. Mama packed food for the trip. Lucy and Molly and me were in the back." "What happened on the road?" The wheel came off. Rose's voice stayed steady, but tears were running down her face, dark tracks on pale skin. The wagon tipped. Mama was thrown out first. She hit her head on a rock. Papa tried to stop the horses, but they were scared. They dragged the wagon 50 feet before he could get them to stop. "And your mother?" "She was dead when Papa got to her." He held her and cried. Rose wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'd never seen Papa cry before. The courtroom was absolutely silent, not even breathing, just waiting. He died 2 days later. The doctor said it was internal bleeding from the crash, but I think he died because he didn't want to live without Mama. "What happened after your parents died?" Uncle Curtis came. "He said he was our guardian now, said we were going to live with him." Rose's jaw tightened. At first it wasn't so bad. He mostly ignored us. But then he started asking questions about the property, about the deed, about what would happen if we weren't around. "What did you understand that to mean?" "Objection." Curtis's lawyer was on his feet. "The witness is a child. She can't interpret complex adult conversations." "Overruled." The judge's voice was ice. "Answer the question, Miss Carter." Rose looked directly at Curtis, held his gaze, didn't blink. "I understood that he wanted us dead, just like he wanted Mama and Papa dead." Curtis's face went red. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispered something urgent. "Did your uncle ever physically harm you or your sisters?" "Yes." Rose's voice was flat, empty of everything except fact. "He beat me with his belt, the one with 3 stars on the buckle. He said I talked back. I didn't. I just asked when we could go back to our own house. How many times did he beat you? I don't know." Rose's voice cracked. "Just slightly. A lot. He beat Lucy too when she cried at night, and he locked Molly in the cellar when she had nightmares." "Objection." Curtis's lawyer was standing again. "These are unsubstantiated claims. There's no physical evidence to support any of this. I have the scars." Rose stood up in the witness box, turned around, pulled her dress down over one shoulder. The courtroom gasped. Even the people who'd heard the stories, even the ones who'd seen the bandages through her clothes. Even they weren't prepared for what they saw. The belt marks were clear, deep, layered, some old and healed to white scars, some new and still pink, and stamped over and over into her skin, burned in deep enough to be permanent, were 3 silver stars. Those are lies. Curtis was standing now, his face purple with rage. All pretense gone, all masks shattered. She did that to herself. She's a liar, just like her father. Sit down, Mr. Bishop. I will not sit down. Curtis's voice rose, shook, broke on the edges. These people are trying to steal what's mine. That land belongs to me. Those children belong to me. Mr. Bishop, I will have you removed from this courtroom. You can't do this. I have rights. I have money. I have connections. You can't just take everything I've worked for. You have the right to remain silent. The judge's gavel came down. Hard. Final. And I strongly suggest you use it. Curtis's lawyer pulled him back down, whispered frantically in his ear. Curtis was shaking, trembling with rage barely contained. Rose pulled her dress back up, sat down, her face white, her hands shaking, but her voice steady when she spoke. Can I go now? You may step down, Miss Carter. The judge's voice was gentle, for the first time all day, actually gentle. Thank you for your testimony. Rose walked back to her seat, her legs shaking, but her head high. James pulled her close with his good arm. I'm proud of you, he whispered. So proud. She didn't answer, just pressed her face against his shoulder and cried. The prosecution calls Lucy Carter to the stand. Lucy stood, smaller than Rose, quieter, her voice barely carrying past the first row. Can you speak up, sweetheart? The prosecutor's voice was kind, patient. I'll try. Lucy clutched her rag doll in her lap. What do you want to know? Can you tell the court what you saw the night before your parents' accident? The night of October 14th. Lucy nodded slowly. I couldn't sleep. I got up to get water, and I saw Uncle Curtis in the barn. What was he doing? He had tools. Papa's tools. He was doing something to the wagon wheels. Lucy's voice trembled. I didn't know what. I was only 7, but he looked scary, so I hid until he left. Did you tell anyone what you saw? I told Rose. She said I must have been dreaming. She said Uncle Curtis lived far away and couldn't be in our barn. Lucy's tears spilled over. But I wasn't dreaming. I know what I saw. What happened later? After your parents died, Uncle Curtis hit me when I asked about the wagon. He said if I ever told anyone about the barn, he'd hurt Rose worse than he'd ever hurt her before. Lucy's voice broke completely, dissolved into sobs. So I didn't tell. I didn't tell anyone. And now Mama and Papa are dead, and it's my fault. It's not your fault. The words came from James before he could stop them, before he could think about courtroom protocol or proper procedure or anything except the absolute need to stop that little girl from blaming herself. Mr. Hart. The judge looked at him sharply. You are out of order. I don't care. James stood, ignored the pain in his shoulder, ignored the shocked whispers, ignored everything except Lucy's tear-stained face. That little girl has been carrying this weight for 4 months. She's been blaming herself for something a grown man did, and I won't sit here and let her believe it's her fault. He looked at Lucy, met her eyes, held them. You were 7 years old. You did the best you could. You protected your sisters the only way you knew how. His voice was fierce, burning, absolutely certain. That's not weakness. That's courage. And I won't let anyone, not even yourself, tell you different. Lucy stared at him, her lip trembling, her whole body shaking. Then she ran. Not away from him, toward him. Threw herself into his arms, sobbed against his chest like the world was ending and he was the only solid thing left. James held her with his good arm, ignored the fire in his shoulder, ignored the whispers from the crowd, ignored the judge trying to restore order. I'm sorry, Lucy cried. I'm sorry I didn't tell. I'm sorry I didn't save them. Shh. James stroked her hair. Gentle, careful. You saved your sisters. That's what matters. That's all that matters. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he banged his gavel. Once. Soft. Court will recess for 15 minutes. When we return, the defense may present their case." The recess passed in a blur. People stood, stretched, whispered, stared at James and the girls like they were trying to understand, trying to piece together the story from fragments. Margaret brought water. Father Daniel prayed quietly in the corner. The girls huddled around James like he was the only safe thing in a world that kept shifting. "What happens now?" Rose asked. "The defense presents their case. Then the judge decides. What if he decides wrong? James didn't have an answer for that. Couldn't promise something he had no control over. Couldn't guarantee justice in a world where men like Curtis Bishop could buy judges and sheriffs and entire towns." The recess ended. Everyone returned to their seats. The bailiff called for order. The defense calls Curtis Bishop to the stand. Curtis walked to the witness box, his limp pronounced, visible, a reminder that James had shot him, that violence had been committed on both sides. He arranged his face into an expression of wounded innocence. The mask back in place, practiced, perfect. "Mr. Bishop," his lawyer began, "you've heard some very serious accusations today. How do you respond?" "I'm heartbroken." Curtis's voice was smooth again, controlled. "My brother's children have been manipulated by opportunists who want their land. Everything I've done out of love for my family. And the custody papers, the signature that the prosecution claims is forged, I signed them myself. Judge Harrison authorized me to do so by telegram. It's a common practice in remote areas." Curtis spread his hands. "I never meant to deceive anyone. I simply wanted to protect my nieces." And the belt marks on Rose's back. Self-inflicted. Curtis's voice was certain, convincing. "Rose has always been a troubled child. Her mother spoiled her terribly. When I tried to impose discipline, she rebelled. I suspect she hurt herself to gain sympathy." In the gallery, Rose made a sound like she'd been punched. "And the fire at Mr. Hart's cabin. A tragic accident." Curtis's face was the picture of regret. "My men were carrying torches for light. The wind was high, sparks caught the roof. I never intended for anyone to be hurt." "Finally, Mr. Bishop, the prosecution has suggested that you murdered your brother and his wife. How do you respond to this accusation?" Curtis looked directly at the judge, his eyes wet, actually wet with tears that might have been real. "William was my brother. I loved him. His death devastated me." His voice cracked. "Perfectly. To suggest that I would harm him would harm his children is monstrous. I am the victim here. The victim of lies and manipulation by people who want what doesn't belong to them." The lawyer sat down, satisfied, like he'd just won the case. "Your witness." The prosecutor stood slowly, walked to the witness box, studied Curtis like he was a specimen under glass. "Mr. Bishop, you say you loved your brother. Is that correct?" "Deeply." "Then can you explain why, in the 4 years before his death, you visited him exactly twice? Once to ask about his property value and once to inquire about his will." Curtis's smile flickered. "I was busy. Business kept me occupied." "Can you explain why 3 witnesses have testified that you asked about railroad survey lines running through the Carter property 6 months before the survey was made public?" "I have connections. Business connections. It's my job to know these things." "Can you explain why in the week after your brother's death you filed claims on 4 other properties along that same survey line? Properties whose owners also died in accidents." "Coincidence." Curtis's voice was getting tight, losing its smoothness. "Tragic coincidence. 4 accidents, 4 properties, all on the same survey line, all acquired by you within days of the owners' deaths." The prosecutor's voice was rising now, getting louder, harder. "That's a remarkable coincidence, Mr. Bishop. I'm a businessman. I recognize opportunities created by the deaths of innocent people." "Objection. Withdrawn." The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution rests." The judge was silent for a long moment, looking at Curtis, looking at the jury, looking at the packed courtroom full of people waiting for justice. "I have heard the testimony. I have examined the evidence, and I have reached a decision." The courtroom held its breath, every person leaning forward, waiting. The forged signature on the custody documents is clear. The tool marks on the wagon bolt match the pliers found in Mr. Bishop's possession. The pattern of land acquisition following suspicious deaths is too consistent to be coincidence. The judge paused. Let the words sink in. But more than any evidence, I am moved by the testimony of 3 children. Children who walked through a blizzard to escape a man who was supposed to protect them. Children who carry scars that no amount of money or legal maneuvering can explain away. He stood. The sound of his chair scraping back was loud in the silence. Curtis Ezekiel Bishop. I find you guilty of fraud, forgery, arson, and kidnapping. On the charge of murder in the first degree regarding William and Mary Carter, I find sufficient evidence to bind you over for trial before a full territorial court. Curtis's face went white, all color draining, all masks shattering. Furthermore, the judge's voice cut through the rising murmur. I hereby declare all custody documents filed by Curtis Bishop to be null and void. The will of William Carter naming James Hart as guardian of his children is recognized as the legal and binding document of record. He looked at James, held his gaze. Mr. Hart, these children are now legally in your care. Raise them well. The courtroom exploded, people cheering, crying, shouting. Sheriff Brooks moving toward Curtis with handcuffs. Curtis's lawyers sputtering objections that no one listened to. James didn't hear any of it. He was looking at Rose, at Lucy, at Molly, his daughters, his family. Mr. James. Molly tugged his sleeve. Does this mean we get to stay with you forever? James pulled her close, pulled all 3 of them close, his good arm not quite long enough to hold them all but trying anyway. Forever, he said, his voice rough, breaking, and ever, and ever. Rose was crying again, but smiling too. Lucy was laughing, actually laughing. A sound James hadn't heard from her before. Molly was asking if forever meant she could play with Bear every day. Margaret appeared beside them, her eyes wet. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. James reached out, pulled her into the embrace too. All of us. Father Daniel joined them. His old face creased with joy. William would be proud. So proud. Across the courtroom, Curtis was being led away in chains. He looked back once, his eyes finding James. This isn't over, Hollister, he snarled, spat the words like venom. I'll appeal. I'll fight this. Those girls are mine. James looked at him calmly. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. They were never yours. They never will be. He pulled his daughters closer, felt them breathe, felt them live, felt them safe. Now get out of my sight. The doors closed behind Curtis Bishop, and for the first time in 4 months, Rose and Lucy and Molly Carter were truly free. The weeks after the trial passed like a fever breaking, like waking from a nightmare to find the sun shining and the world still intact. Curtis was transferred to the territorial prison to await his murder trial. His assets were seized, his land deals unwound. 4 families received compensation for properties that should never have been taken, and James began the slow work of building a new life. The cabin was gone, nothing left but charred timbers and ash and the ghost of what had been. But the land remained. The forge still stood, and that was enough to start. We could stay in town, Margaret said one morning watching James sketch plans on a scrap of paper. Mrs. Patterson has rooms above the general store. It would be easier. Easier ain't better. James's pencil moved across the page, creating lines, shapes, the skeleton of a home. The girls need space, room to run, room to heal. They need a roof over their heads. They'll have one. James looked up, met her eyes. Soon as I can build it. Margaret looked at the sketch. It was larger than his old cabin, much larger. 3 bedrooms where there used to be 1. 1 for each of them, James said quietly. They've been sleeping in the same room their whole lives. Might be nice to have their own space. That's a lot of building for a man with 1 good arm. I've got 2 good arms, One's just resting." Margaret laughed. Warm, real. The kind of laugh that made something in James's chest feel lighter. "You're stubborn, James Hart. So I've been told." The building took 3 months. James did most of the work himself, even with his shoulder still healing, even with the pain that shot down his arm every time he raised it above his head. But help came from unexpected places. Ranchers who'd watched the trial brought lumber, said they had extra, said they'd just been sitting on it and might as well put it to use. Miners who'd heard Rose's testimony brought nails and tools, showed up on Saturdays with their sons, taught the boys how to measure and cut and build something that would last. Even Sheriff Brooks arrived one morning with a wagon full of window glass, unloaded it without a word, just tipped his hat and left before James could say thank you. The girls helped too, in their own ways. Rose learned to measure and cut boards, her hands growing calloused from the saw, her shoulders strong from carrying lumber that should have been too heavy for an 11-year-old. Lucy organized supplies with the same precision she brought to everything, keeping inventory lists in a notebook Margaret had given her, tracking every nail and screw and board like they were treasures. And Molly supervised, which mostly meant running around with Bear, occasionally handing James the wrong tool, talking to anyone who would listen about her new house and her new papa, and how everything was going to be perfect forever. Father Daniel came every Sunday after church, sat on an overturned bucket, told stories about the old days, about miners and missionaries and the first settlers who'd carved a life out of unforgiving land. "Your father was one of the good ones," he told Rose one afternoon. "Honest, hard-working, always helped his neighbors without being asked." Rose was sanding a board, her movements slow and careful. "I remember. He used to say that a man's worth wasn't measured by what he owned, but by what he gave away. Smart man, the smartest." Rose's voice caught. "I miss him every day. That's how you know he mattered." Father Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. "The people we love never really leave us, Rose. They live on in the things we do, the choices we make, the people we become." Rose was quiet for a long moment. "Do you think he'd be proud of me? For testifying? I think he'd be proud of you for everything. For protecting your sisters, for surviving, for learning to trust again." Father Daniel smiled. "You've got his strength, child, his courage. Don't ever forget that." "I won't." The house was finished in June. Walls solid, roof tight. 3 bedrooms just like James had drawn. A kitchen big enough for the whole family to gather. A porch that faced the mountains. They held a small celebration. Margaret brought a cake she'd baked herself, slightly lopsided but sweet. Father Daniel said a blessing. The neighbors who'd helped with the building raised glasses of cider and wished the new family well. To the Harts, someone called out. Rose looked at James. "Is that who we are now?" The Harts. "If you want to be." James knelt down so he was at eye level with all 3 girls. "What about Carter? That's our real name, Papa's name. You can be whoever you want to be." James touched Rose's cheek. Gentle, careful. "Carter, Hart, both. Neither. Names don't make a family. Love does." He pulled back, met each of their eyes in turn. "And I love you 3, no matter what you call yourselves." Lucy spoke up quietly. "Can we be both Carter Hart?" "That's a mouthful. I like mouthfuls." Molly was already eating her second piece of cake. "More is better." Everyone laughed. Even Rose, who'd been so serious, so guarded, let out a sound that was almost a giggle. "Carter Hart it is," James said. "Official as of right now." That night, after the guests had gone and the cake was reduced to crumbs, James sat on the porch of his new house and watched the stars come out. The door opened. Rose came out, sat beside him in the gathering dark. "Can't sleep, too quiet." She pulled her knees up to her chest. "I keep waiting for something bad to happen, for someone to come and take this all away. Nobody's taking anything. Curtis is in prison. The law is on our side. You're safe." "I know." Rose tapped her head. "Up here, but here she touched her heart takes longer." James nodded. He understood that better than she knew. "After Catherine died, I didn't sleep for 2 years. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her voice, felt her hand in mine. His voice was rough, raw, the kind of honesty that hurt coming out. I thought the pain would kill me. Some nights I wanted it to. Rose looked at him. What changed? You knocked on my door. James met her eyes. 3 frozen girls who needed someone, and suddenly I had a reason to keep going. We saved you. You saved each other. James touched her shoulder. Light. Careful. I just held the door open. Rose was quiet for a long time, the kind of quiet that meant she was working up courage for something. Mr. James? Yeah. Can I call you something else? Like what? She hesitated. The word stuck in her throat like it might burn coming out. Papa. James's heart stopped, then started again, beating harder than it had in 7 years. You don't have to, Rose said quickly. I know you're not our real papa. I know William Carter will always be our father. But you're... She struggled for words. You're the one who's here, the one who stayed, the one who fought for us. Her voice cracked, broke open. I used to think families were just blood, just people who looked like you and shared your name. But you taught me different. You taught me that family is a choice. She wiped her eyes. And I choose you, if you'll have me. James couldn't speak. His throat had closed up completely, so he pulled her close instead, held her the way he'd wanted to hold his own daughter, the one who'd lived for 3 hours and then slipped away before he could memorize her face. I'll have you, he managed. All 3 of you. Always. Promise. There was that word again, the word that used to taste like rust, like broken vows and shattered dreams. Now it tasted like home. I promise. Summer turned to fall. Fall turned to winter. The first anniversary of the girls' arrival came and went. James marked it quietly. A special breakfast, a day off from chores, a visit to the cemetery where they'd finally buried William and Mary Carter properly, with headstones and flowers and words spoken by Father Daniel that made even Rose cry. They're at peace now, Father Daniel said, and so are you. Margaret had been spending more and more time at the ranch. At first it was just visits, bringing supplies from town, teaching the girls to read and write, helping with the endless work of running a household. But somewhere along the way the visits had become something else, something neither of them had named, but both of them knew. You should just move in, Molly said one evening with the devastating honesty of a 5-year-old. You're here all the time anyway. Margaret went red. James choked on his coffee. Molly. Rose was mortified. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Molly looked genuinely confused. It's true. Don't you want Miss Margaret to stay, Papa? The room went silent, everyone looking at James, waiting. James looked at Margaret. Margaret looked at James. The air between them charged with something unspoken. Well, James said slowly, I suppose the question is whether Miss Margaret wants to stay. I suppose Margaret said equally slowly, that depends on whether I'm being asked. Am I what? Being asked. Rose rolled her eyes. For goodness sake, Papa asked Miss Margaret to marry you. Miss Margaret say yes. Can we have dessert now? Lucy burst out laughing. Actual full laughing, the kind that bent her double and made her gasp for air. Even James couldn't help grinning. You heard the boss, he said to Margaret. Will I what? Marry me. Stay with us. Be part of this family we're building. His voice went serious, dropped the humor, showed the truth underneath. I know it's not conventional. A broken-down rancher with 3 adopted daughters and a dog that sheds too much. But I'm offering everything I have, everything I am. That's quite an offer. Margaret looked at the girls, at Rose, who was pretending not to care but clearly cared desperately, at Lucy, who was watching with quiet hope, at Molly, who was vibrating with excitement. It's more than enough, she said. Yes, Molly screamed, actually screamed with joy. Lucy clapped her hands. Rose tried to maintain her dignity and failed completely, throwing her arms around Margaret with a force that nearly knocked them both over. Welcome to the family, Rose whispered. Welcome to us. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. Father Daniel officiated. The girls served as bridesmaids, all three in matching blue dresses that Margaret had sewn herself. "Do you, James Hart, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Margaret Ford, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Father Daniel smiled. "You may kiss the bride." They kissed. The girls cheered. Bear barked. And somewhere James could have sworn he felt Catherine smiling down at them, approving, blessing, letting him go so he could live again. Life settled into a rhythm. James worked the ranch. Margaret ran the telegraph office and taught the girls their lessons. Rose learned to ride like she'd been born in the saddle. Lucy discovered a talent for numbers that Margaret said would make her a fine bookkeeper someday. And Molly collected frogs and rocks and feathers and anything else that caught her eye, filling her room with treasures that made sense only to her. They fought sometimes, small arguments about chores and bedtimes and who ate the last piece of pie, but they made up quickly, because that's what families did. Curtis was convicted of murder in October. He was sentenced to hang. The girls didn't attend the execution. But James rode to the territorial prison and watched from the crowd as the man who'd caused so much pain finally faced justice. "It's over," Sheriff Brooks said afterward. "Really over this time." James thought about it, about Curtis, about the girls, about everything that had led to this moment. "I know," he said. "How do you feel?" "Empty. Like I should feel something more. Satisfaction. Relief. But I just feel empty. That's because revenge never fills you up." Brooks clapped him on the shoulder. "Only love does that. Go home to your family, James. That's where you belong." He did. Spring came again, the second spring since the girls had knocked on his door. James was in the forge shaping a horseshoe when Rose appeared in the doorway. "Papa." He set down his hammer. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She walked to him slowly. "I just wanted to give you something." She held out her hand. In her palm was a small iron horseshoe, perfectly formed, still warm from the fire. "I made it myself," she said. "Margaret showed me how. It took me 6 tries, but I finally got it right." James took the horseshoe, felt the weight, examined the curves. The proportions were perfect, the nail holes clean, the metal smooth. Rose's voice cracked. "This is beautiful. I wanted to make something for you, something to say thank you. You didn't have to make me anything." "I know, but I wanted to." She looked at the floor. "For everything, for opening your door, for fighting for us, for being our papa." James set down the horseshoe, pulled Rose into his arms, held her tight. "You 3 are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even better than the first Miss Margaret. Different. Not better or worse. Just different." James pulled back, looked into her eyes. "Love isn't a competition, Rose. There's room in my heart for all of you. There always will be." Rose nodded. Then she smiled. Real. Bright. The kind of smile that made her look her age instead of 40. "Molly wants to know if we can have pancakes for dinner." "Pancakes for dinner? She says it's a special occasion." "What occasion?" She didn't say. Rose's eyes sparkled. "I think she just wants pancakes." James laughed. Full, deep, the kind of laugh he'd thought he'd forgotten how to make. "Then pancakes it is." They walked back to the house together. The sun setting, painting the sky orange and pink and gold, the mountains standing tall in the distance, the creek singing its endless song. Inside, Lucy was setting the table. Margaret was mixing batter. Molly was telling Bear a very serious story about a princess and a frog and a giant who saved them from a dragon. "The giant was really tall," Molly said earnestly, "taller than a tree, and he had a hammer that could smash anything. But he was also really gentle. He never smashed anyone who didn't deserve it." "Is this story about Papa?" Lucy asked. "Maybe." Molly grinned. "But in my story, the giant has a beard. Papa doesn't have a beard. That's why it's my story. I can do what I want." James stood in the doorway watching his family, his wife at the stove, his daughters around the table, his dog on the floor, his home warm and bright and full of love. 2 years ago he'd been a ghost, a hollow man living in a hollow house, waiting to die. Then 3 frozen girls had knocked on his door and everything had changed. "Are you crying?" Molly looked up at him. "No." James wiped his eyes. "Just happy. Grown-ups are weird." "Yeah." James smiled. "We really are." He crossed to Margaret, wrapped his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, still stirring the batter. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "Doors. About how one moment can change everything. One choice, one knock." He pressed his lips to her hair. "I almost didn't open it that night. Almost stayed by my fire and let the silence swallow me. But you didn't." "No. I didn't." "Why not?" James thought about it. About the knock. About the wind. About the feeling that had moved through him when he'd heard those 3 weak taps. "Because something told me that what was on the other side was worth the risk." He turned Margaret to face him. And it was. God help me, it was. Even with everything that happened, the fire, the trial, getting shot, especially with all that. He cupped her face in his hands. "I'd do it all again, every moment, every scar, every sleepless night, because it led me here, to you, to them, to this." Margaret kissed him, soft, sweet, full of promise. "I love you, James Hart. I love you too, Margaret Hart." "Ew," Molly said loudly. "They're being mushy again." "Let them be mushy," Rose said. "They're old. They need it." "I'm not old," James protested. "You have gray hair," Lucy pointed out. "One gray hair. That's how it starts." Rose grinned. "Next you'll be complaining about your back and yelling at clouds." "I don't yell at clouds yet." Everyone laughed. Even James, though he tried to look offended. The pancakes were perfect. They ate together, all 5 of them, plus Bear, who got the burnt edges because Molly insisted dogs deserved pancakes too. After dinner, they sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. Molly fell asleep in James's lap. Lucy leaned against Margaret's shoulder. Rose sat beside James, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For opening the door." James looked at his oldest daughter, at the girl who'd walked 6 miles through a blizzard to save her sisters, who'd stood up to a monster and testified against him in open court, who'd learned to trust again, to love again, to believe that the world could be good. "Thank you for knocking," he said. They sat in comfortable silence as the moon rose over the mountains. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. Bear's ears twitched, but he didn't bark. This was home. This was family. This was everything James had given up hoping for. And it had all started with a door that opened on a cold winter night, a door that let in 3 frozen girls and changed everything. Years later, people would tell the story different ways. Some said James was a hero who saved 3 helpless orphans. Others said the girls saved him. The truth was simpler and more complicated than either version. They saved each other, because that's what families do. The horseshoe Rose made hung above the front door of the Hart house for 50 years. It weathered storms and witnessed weddings and saw 3 girls grow into 3 remarkable women. It was there when grandchildren were born. When Margaret passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. When James finally let go at 89, surrounded by daughters and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all knew the story. The story of how their family began. A knock in the darkness, a door that opened, a choice that changed everything. Good things can't be rushed, but when they come, when you build them right with patience and love and hands that never give up, they last forever. The door opened, the family began, and the love that started that frozen night burned bright for generations.